Everyone, it's Lisa Norell. Welcome to the Mindful Marketer live stream and podcast, episode 75. The show is sponsored by the CMO's Leading Innovation Conference coming up on November 2nd and 3rd in the cool city known as Nashville, Tennessee, here in the United States. So if you haven't registered yet to join us to write your 2024 Innovation Songbook, make sure you visit that link, tinyurl.com/click 2023. And we also want to thank Belmont University for hosting us this year. It's going to be a great session. Now, let's talk about the show today. If you want to look at something that's been top of mind now for top companies such as Airbnb, Zurich Insurance, Zappos, and Chewy's, you have come to the right place. Right now, we are going to be talking about customer experience and employee experience and the magic formula behind the two. It's an important one because when it comes to healthy growth, our special guest, Tiffani Bova, says it perfectly. Quote, the fastest way to get customers to love your brand is to get employees to love their job. Yet, as I talk to many CMOs and host our peer groups, many still pursue CX and brand initiatives at the expense of their employee experience and employee initiatives. So this show will matter to you because the latest research that we are going to hear about from Tiffani Bova really challenges our old beliefs that the customer is always right or the customer is always number one. So today, let's get ready to learn a few key things, such as Tiffani's practical insights from several top studies on customer experience and employee experience, clarity around mandates, marketing and metrics, and some first steps you need to take towards healthy growth and integration of CX and EX. Tiffani's joining us today from Los Angeles, where she is customer growth and innovation evangelist with the software juggernaut Salesforce. She's worked with some major brands, including Cisco, Amazon Web Services, AT&T, and Microsoft. So for all of our US friends, you got to stay online because we are doing a book giveaway of her latest book, which further reinforces her role as a Thinkers 50 award-winning thought leader, the experience mindset. So stick around, all of our US friends, and tell us where you're from in the chat. Come on up to stage here, Tiffani, and welcome.
Oh, Lisa, thank you for the kind introduction. Thrilled to be here and have this conversation with you today.
Well, I'm glad we got to know each other through 100 Coaches too. That has been, as I call it, it's the gift that keeps on giving.
So true. So true.
So we're going to keep our eye out here in the chat to see who's with us today. And while we're doing that, I'd love to hear more about your book idea. Like, when did you wake up in the morning and go, oh my gosh, this is a burning issue. I need to write my next book about this?
I had no intentions of writing a second book. So my first book I wrote in 2018 called Growth IQ. And that concept was 10 paths to growth. So I thought through my practicing days of running sales, marketing, and customer service, and then my academia days of being a research fellow at Gartner. I had seen a lot, maybe not all, but I'd seen a lot of how businesses grow, small, medium, and large enterprise. And so those 10 paths to growth, I thought I had nailed, right? The very first path was customer experience, which, Lisa, as you just mentioned, right? Customer being first, being your true north, being the center of the decisions that you make and all of your intentions as a company. And I thought I had nailed that, right? The other 9 paths were very supportive. But what I missed in that book was the role that employees play in delivering that customer experience. In many ways, they are the keepers of that brand promise that you make as a company, as a marketer, as an organization. And I think the research that I did over the last couple of years really highlighted the fact that maybe in some ways the experience mindset is the 11th path that I missed. So that's really why I decided to write a second book, because I felt that I just didn't cover the totality and the sort of interconnectedness of employee in all of those other growth strategies I had outlined in Growth IQ.
And thank you, by the way, for defining EX. Because, I try very hard not to throw around acronyms unless we really understand what they are. And on page 164 of your book, The Experience Mindset, it said so well. You call it a method to design and deliver simple and personalized employee experiences that feel uniquely Salesforce. So you did a case study on your own employer, essentially. And it's all in a drive to create better business outcomes. Okay, here comes the devil's advocate. Isn't that what HR was supposed to do? And, shouldn't they get that handled and own all of that?
So here's where I'll give a little caveat. I am not a people expert, nor am I a culture expert. I'm a go-to-market, sales marketing, customer success, or customer service. That's really sort of my lane. So I want to be really clear. This conversation of the experience mindset is at that moment that matters, when an employee in some way touches a customer. And that touch may be online, offline. It may be a human. It may be a bot. It may be the packaging that you put together. It may be an ad campaign that someone designs. Any kind of interaction, that moment is what I'm talking about in this mindset that I'm trying to reimagine. So one could argue, back to that question, who owns that moment that matters when an employee touches a customer? And what experience mindset does not cover is things like compensation, equity, and inclusion, super important and very valuable, and tend to be the remit of HR, right? Or human resources. The technology that human resources pays attention to tends to be that employees would engage with for time off or maternity leave or pay increases or, having one-on-ones or, setting goals for the year, like those kinds of things that are very human resource oriented. But I think you may agree, let's just say, that marketing kicks off a campaign that the call center agent is going to have to be responsible for when someone calls in, right? Let's say it's an upsell, cross-sell campaign from a marketer, okay? And that
Wall
call
Street
center
Journal does that to me all the time. The Wall Street Journal, constantly trying to upsell.
doesn't everybody, really? I mean, right? You've already got a customer, so can you get more share of wallet, increase, purchase basket size or recency of purchase? There's lots of things, right, that marketing is responsible for around lifetime value, et cetera. But marketing will kick that off in some way. Maybe it happens online, but let's specifically talk about it in the call center. So, Lisa calls in, I'm the call center rep. Marketing has given a campaign that's now in, right? Either it's on a Post-it note or it's printed out on my desk, right? Of here's the campaign. When a customer calls in and says these things or has this product, we want you to offer this product. So now it's time for me to do that. Maybe I wasn't trained. Maybe I don't have access to the information of what the customer currently has purchased with us already. So unless that customer says something to me about what they've purchased, I don't know that. So the campaign, let's just say, falls flat. Let's just say, right? There's no real uptick, or a handful of people over here did it really well and the rest of the call center didn't do it really well. Whose responsibility was that? Now, based on what you just asked, you said, wouldn't HR own that whole experience? I think we could say, I don't think they own that experience for that employee, right? That employee feels like, hold on a second, I wasn't trained, I wasn't enabled, I don't have access to the information, the data isn't consistent across the two tools I use, or I have to log into 3 or 4 things, whatever it might be, right? So now I'll push it back to you. Who's responsible for helping that employee not only be successful, but have a great experience in what they do every day, which may be this upsell, cross-sell campaign? Who's responsible for that?
Well, in one of your interviews, it might have been with Guy Kawasaki, you said you believe in joint responsibility and accountability between the CIO and, I believe you said, the CMO. So take us down a path where you've seen that kind of collaboration really blossom in a specific company, because you get to see really amazing companies in this realm by working with the gorilla we love and know as Salesforce.
Well, let's continue to play that through. So the question is, whose responsibility would that be to make that a successful campaign at the execution layer, which again, you started this conversation with, right? The happiest way to get customers to love your brand is get employees to love their job. I've now done this 10 times. I'm in the call center, right? I've had 10 Lisas call in and it wasn't a great experience for me. So by the 6th or 7th time, now I'm short. I'm a little bit disengaged. I'm not satisfied, right? And it's showing in my communication style with the customer, which then means the customer doesn't get a great experience with me or with the company or with the brand. So how would we solve that? I don't know necessarily if it is just the CIO and the CMO. Does the CMO actually go, we're going to do this campaign, which requires Tiffani as the call center agent, right, to have access to this information? Do they have access to that information? Oh, they don't have access to that information. Does the CMO then go to the CIO and say, hey, Mr. Miss CIO, right? I need to make sure our call center agents have access to that information. The CIO goes, I don't make those decisions. You have to go over here to our compliancy and risk management team. And then the compliancy and risk management team says, well, hold on a second. I can't make that decision. You have to go to the head of customer success or customer service. Now, all of a sudden, right, I'm a CMO. You're like, geez, I'm just trying to run a campaign. Now I've just mentioned 4 leaders that had to be involved in making that campaign a success for the employee. So it isn't just one executive, but it is really the ask of experience mindset is when making decisions anywhere in the organization on behalf of a customer to either reduce effort for them, increase the experience for them, make a more personalized engagement, sell them more things, whatever the goal may be. What is the intended or unintended consequence to the employee? And in that scenario I just mentioned, right? The CIO, the CMO, the head of risk and compliance. I'm trying to be dramatic on purpose, right? And then you have the head of customer service. And then maybe even you need to get sales involved because it requires them then to enter an order in something that maybe customer service doesn't even have access to. Let's say the CRM tool, right? Or a Salesforce tool or something else. Now, do you get all of them together in order to plan for this upsell, cross-sell campaign? A CMO listening to this might be like, oh my goodness, like that is a lot to do. But
and I'm already understaffed. And I've survived a layoff post-pandemic. OMG.
Yes. Yeah. Right. And so that is why this mindset is when you're going to do something that you're asking those questions. And very quickly, what we found through the research is, number one, no one owns employee experience. To your question, right, that isn't this HR's responsibility, where how I just described it touched tools, training, enablement, right? When I say enablement, maybe, look, you don't even have access to that kind of data. That is very cross-functional. And so until someone starts to look at that journey map of the employee doing what you're asking them to do, similar to what you've done in journey mapping the customer, it will consistently be a less than optimal experience for the employee. And that is what we found, that employee experience is so far removed from all these efforts we'd paid towards, the customer, especially with the billions we've spent over the last 2 or so decades on improving customer experience, that's why this has really come to light through the pandemic. Now, to your question of who's doing it right, this is really difficult because does the CMO want to pick it up with less resources and a lot more responsibility? Does HR want to get involved in this? Does the CIO want to take it on as their remit? Does risk and compliance or change management or the head of sales or customer service want to do it? Everyone's like, look, I'm maxed out.
Yes. Right.
I am maxed, right? And so that's why I didn't want it to be a recommendation that you need a new role. You need a new C-suite leader. You need a new siloed group with new metrics. It has to be a mindset shift to say, when we do things for customer, we look out for the employees. And so examples I gave in the book were Best Buy or Ritz-Carlton or Airbnb or Chewy or Zappos. But I will tell you that it's not that everyone is hyper consistent, right? It may be regions, markets, groups, teams. The call center for online versus the call center for brick and mortar might be different. Like, this silos and disjointed processes has permeated so many organizations for so long that unfortunately it sits on the shoulders of the employees.
It does. And the more things change, the more they stay the same, or something like that.
Yes.
I remember sitting in the office of one of the world's largest investment banks back in the early 2000s, who spent $10 million on CRM software. And they said, we can't get it to work because the salespeople here are known as investment bankers. And we can barely get them to share their index cards with us, let alone enter very confidential M&A customer data in a CRM system. Please unplug it and give us our money back. And so I was one of the people that had to go in and talk with their top investment bankers and figure out what part of the process went wrong so we can try this again on a smaller scale and treat it as to your point, a cross-functional, collaborative approach versus forcing this down the throats of these multi-millionaire investment bankers,
Right.
who kind of ran the show, right? They run the show. So how is it that after all these years, even in your new studies, your new research, you found over 1,000 unique software applications in these organizations that you studied, and only 24% have integrated applications? I mean, it's 22 years later.
It's mind-boggling, right? And I ask this all the time, and CMOs, I think, will understand this better than anybody. Would we ever, in a million years, well, let me say that differently. Would we ever post 2010 ask our customers to have to log into 5 different tabs on their desktop or their iPad or their phone to place an order? One to find the product, one to place the order, one to enter, one tab to enter credit card information, one tab to enter shipping information, open another tab in a totally different system to track your order. Would we ever ask our customers to have to go 5 places to place an order? Would we ever ask them to click 10 times to place an order today in 2023? I think you wouldn't be a CMO very long, and your company wouldn't be around very long if that was the case, right? But yet, just to that stat you just said, we ask our employees to do it every day. They have to log in. That stat you just gave, it's, enterprises have an average of, I think it's now 1,062 unique applications inside of it. And you could say that, listen, HR or finance may not be ones that ever need to be integrated. So carve those out. Let's give 100, whatever, 900 applications. And you only have a quarter of them integrated. Who bears that? That is a CIO responsibility. And back to your comment about the CRM didn't work. No, the CRM worked. The humans weren't willing to change behavior. The humans weren't embracing change. The humans weren't given a good enough reason why they should put it in there. Like, just to do it because it's part of your job or you've been told to do it is not a good enough reason. And I hear it consistently. Technology has to be valued by those using it. It can't just be a way to measure and monitor the people who work for you. Like, it can't just be an input device so that some executive way up the food chain gets a dashboard every day of forecasts and pipelines and the health of the business. No, it needs to be also that the people using it get more value because of it. I used to run marketing campaigns off an Excel spreadsheet, not very efficient and effective. I couldn't figure out ROI, and I couldn't figure out click-through rates, and I couldn't figure out what campaigns were working well early 2000s. I was Constant Contact's beta client, and I was Eloqua's beta client. I have watched technology go from Post-it notes and Rolodexes on desks, right, all the way to things that are very predictive and generative AI. And I've watched it moved significantly, but that doesn't mean humans have been willing to go along that journey. They're resistant to change. And we've also seen the amount of change that companies put on top of their employees annually has increased. And that's why they're feeling even more burnout. So, look, we just have to make sure that when we are thinking about the customer, that we're not ignoring the people who work for us. And in some cases, they may be gig workers. It might be partners. It might be vendors, in your greater ecosystem or stakeholders. It's not just those employees that are on your payroll. It's anyone who you are expecting, right, to do something on behalf of your brand, but more importantly, that they're touching your customer base on behalf of you. You have to make sure that they have everything they need.
Yes. And thank you for punctuating earlier about the software was not the issue. It was the approach and the lack of change leadership that stopped people in their tracks and said, time out. I'm a very successful investment banker. Why would I change? I'm doing great with my index cards.
Right.
And so it is that they were
Until
not
you're
engaged.
Not.
Yeah.
Until you're not.
Yeah. I'll never forget Jim. Like, I sat across from him. He ran the entire, at the time, it was the largest IPO in American history, known as UPS. And he's like shrugging his shoulders, like, what's in it for me? Why would I do this? And I said, he's got a point. He's got a point. And I'm not arguing with him.
Yeah. And even listen, even, for the marketers listening, right? You are asking people to run campaigns and it may be in different systems. And look, I'm not here to talk about, Salesforce and that can solve the problem. Technology can solve the problem, us or someone else. I'd hope it was us. But at the end of the day, it's still people. And it's hard individually to change ourselves, let alone as a leader, get people to want to change. And then one person, well, what if you have 5? What if you have 10? What if you have 100 or 1,000 or 5,000 or 10,000? It's a lot of hearts and minds to change. And so, that is why having the right mindset, communication, transparency, trust, C-suite alignment, accountability, seamless technology. I just rattled off a lot. Those are the things we found in the research between the C-suite leaders and the employees, that there is this disconnection. That, right, if they had included the investment bankers in the decision on why to get this technology, and maybe they put them on an advisory board, right, or decision team or the project team, they may go, oh, I understand why, I see the value. This could really help us. Now, all of a sudden, they become your advocates internally. The similar way the marketers externally want to say, we want brand advocates. We want people talking about us, right? We want affiliates and influencers talking about our brand externally. You also want employees telling other employees why what the company is doing is good. And so that same level of why not treat internal employees as internal customers and do things similar to what you do for customers. You have customer advisory boards. Why not employee advisory boards, right? You track customer satisfaction and NPS. Well, why don't you track ENPS and employee satisfaction? You want to make sure your customers never have to click 10 times to buy something or go to 5 systems. Well, do you do that for your employees? I mean, we could go on and on and on. And I think those listening would agree that they don't put the same amount of effort for the majority as they do on customers as they do for employees.
It is time to definitely factor those questions in. While we also encourage those of you watching right now, I see some viewers in from Miami right now. Andrea, welcome. Please post your questions for us, and we'll make sure we get to those in the remaining 10 minutes. Also, remember, book giveaway happening at the end of the show. So let's talk a little more about our audience who joined us today, who signed up for this fun session with us. Several of them work for smaller companies than Chewy or Zurich Insurance or Airbnb. Step us through. Well, first question, is employee experience, is the mindset and the process behind it relegated exclusively for very large companies? And then we'll follow up with my second question.
It is focused on companies that have an employee, right? Like if you have employees, small, medium, or large, the difficulty as you are smaller is people wear multiple hats. So the CEO may run HR, run marketing, right? And even run sales. And then maybe the IT function is actually outsourced to a value added reseller or a systems integrator. It's not even, IT is not even managed by someone who works full time there, or it's your friend's brother's cousin's sister. I mean, who knows, right? Um, uh, so when it's a smaller organization, the issue tends to be there's not enough people. But one of the examples that I gave in the book was a company out of Canada, out of Vancouver, and the CEO at the time is also on Dragon's Den, which is the Canadian version of Shark Tank, and she's a double unicorn, so has built a $2 billion business. But don't think it's an enterprise. She had a little more than 100 employees at the time, and she was in hyper growth mode. And she had sort of felt like, hold on a second, the culture, I feel like it's getting a little away from us. We've made some M&A, maybe the processes have gotten more complicated. Do we have the right technology? Is everybody using and have access to what they need? So she set up an email box that said the stupid, and she used a swear word, but it was the stupid stuff we do at, and her company name. And 120 employees, that was manageable. And she asked one thing, tell me one thing of the stupid stuff we're doing that if we could stop doing it, it would make your life, your workday, your productivity better. Lo and behold, people answered. Now, had she just done that and then not done anything with it, that would have backfired on trust and transparency. But sure enough, they responded. And so they said, okay, we heard you. It kind of fell in these 5 or 6 buckets. Here are the things we're going to be doing in the short term, medium term, long term. Here are the things we're not going to be doing and why. And course corrected some things and was like, wow, I didn't know we were still doing this. Like, how did we miss stopping that process? Because we no longer actually even offer that service. So we were things that just got neglected in high growth mode. And when you're small and you don't have people paying attention to every area of the business, it even can get worse more quickly. So it is about, if you're looking to scale, if you're in hypergrowth mode, and if you're in hypergrowth mode and you think what you're doing will continue to work, that is a really bad strategy. Like, you need to constantly be revisiting what you're doing, how you're doing it, where you're doing it, and why you're doing it. And that is the responsibility of the leaders. So don't hear that just because I rattled off many roles, that because you don't have those roles, you don't have to worry about it. As soon as you start to get to 5 or 10 employees, you need to start paying attention that the habits you create when you're small will follow you as you grow. The majority of companies in the US are small business. Like, we'll never get larger. I think it's like only 5 or 6% of businesses, across the US get larger than $5 million, which means the majority are small businesses. And so is this relevant to you? Yes. If you have employees, you want them to stay, you want to retain them, you want them to be successful and satisfied and happy, and most definitely you want them to love their job.
I love the story about the Vancouver company. Now, when she set up that inbox, was it set up so that the comments were anonymized and people would be more fearless, or
No.
the comments were attributed back to actual people?
Correct, because it wasn't like, I don't like working here. It was, I am being asked to do this and that, and I actually don't have access to that information. So I constantly have to send an email to someone else to get approval to do what you're asking me to do. If you could just give me that ability to do it without having to ask, it could really save me an hour or 2 every day. So now, why would you want that anonymized, right? But it goes to culture. It goes to trust. It goes to psychological safety. And so if you have a culture where you don't reward good ideas, right? Or you chastise ideas that go against yours, or you embarrass people, or you ignore comments, or you share them and go, oh my goodness, like Lisa said the stupidest thing, and like sort of chuckles about it, it will destroy your culture. And the next time you ask, nobody will answer. So great question, because I think this goes towards building a culture, which is an entire chapter in the book. And what kind of culture needs to be created is one where you could ask those questions, get those answers, And maybe it's a Slack channel like we do it here at Salesforce. We have an all Salesforce comments Slack channel, and sometimes it's ugly. Like, sometimes it's really pointed and harsh, but it is always responded to and always answered with grace and kindness
Well,
and all of those things. So, but that's our culture. And so going back to what I
absolutely.
said.
And Mark Benioff does not shy away from tough questions. I mean, if he can survive the wrath of Kara Swisher, he can survive a Slack channel.
Yeah.
So I've heard his interviews, and he's not afraid. He's just not afraid to handle tough questions. And I trust that's consistent with how he communicates with people within Salesforce.
Well, trust is our number one core value. So, it's trust with customer data. It's trust with each other. It's trust between leadership and employees. It's trust between our brand and our customers, and our brand and our partners, and the greater stakeholders and shareholders we serve. It is our number one value. So if you're not going to sort of be able to accept tough criticism, and again, this is not that the criticism is 100% correct all the time, or this isn't that criticism isn't going to hurt your feelings, or it stings a little bit, or you weren't aware of it. But I just use, in the US anyway, Undercover Boss is a great example. Like, that is transparency and vulnerability at its finest in an hour TV show. But the fact that executives don't know those things are going on in their business shows that they don't really ask, and they don't care enough to ask, or they're not looking in the right places, or they're managing the business from a spreadsheet or within their four walls, and they have no connection to the people who work with them or for them. And that's where the result of that is you end up with a great resignation or quiet quitting, or you can't retain and recruit great talent, or people are just sort of collecting a paycheck and don't care. If you don't care, they won't care.
Name one company. We have a time for a couple more questions, but could you name one company that actually started lacking an employee experience mindset, that you saw really turn the corner and finally embrace it to the advantage of their stakeholders and shareholders?
Yeah, there's a couple great stories in the book, but I will tell you, it usually happens when there is a leadership change. If it has been a behavior that's sort of been going on, and let's say employee satisfaction scores have been dropping consistently, and no one sort of dug in, or to one of your very first questions, that's HR's responsibility, not our responsibility, right? And they'll go figure it out.
We'll just do a seminar or a workshop and we'll fix it.
One time, right? Let me
That's
just
right.
have an all hand. I care about you. I care about you. I want you to be successful. And then you never hear from the leader again, right? For another 12 months until something comes up. So my advice is understand what's going on in the business. If you see your employee satisfaction scores dipping, do you see a correlating effect on NPS? If your NPS scores are dipping, can you see that, well, 2 quarters ago, we really saw a dip in employee satisfaction? If you start to look at KPIs and metrics in a more aligned way, you may start to realize the connection between the two. Because when I started to share this research globally, when it first came out on roundtables via Zoom, because it was sort of at the tail end of the lockdown in the US, I heard these 3 things. One, if it's so painfully obvious, why isn't everyone doing it? To your point, right? The question of who is doing it. 2, who owns it? Which I think in that question is a very fixed mindset. It's a very expert's mind. Someone has to own it, which means there's a new group, a new team, a new leader, there's new KPIs, and it becomes their responsibility instead of it being a mindset shift, a culture shift, where it's everybody's responsibility to consider employees when making decisions for the company instead of only thinking about the customer. This is not about customer first and employee second, or employee first or customer second. This is an and play. The third question I got is, what's the ROI? I can tell ROI on spend for CAC, right? Or customer acquisition cost, or return on a marketing investment. I spend $1, I make 80 cents, or I spend $1 and I can pay that back in three months, or my lifetime value pays it back, or this is the, whatever it might be, those numbers. Well, what is the return on investment for employee experience? What's the return on investing in talent reskilling? What's the investment in training people how to use GPT? What,
Right.
we could go on and on, right? They wanted to know the ROI. Those were sort of the 3 big questions. And to me, then they've missed the point that the danger here is that you're just only going to get so much if you keep only focusing on customer. It will only go so high. But what we
Understood.
found in the research was those brands that get this right have a 1.8 times faster growth rate. So for $1 billion brand, it's a $40 million impact. If you're not a $1 billion brand, you can do the math on it, but it's like an 8.3, 8.4%
Yes.
CAGR. And so, go ahead.
Tiffani, what we're going to do is we're going to make sure that we put a link in the show notes to the
Amazing.
research and ways people can find you. The amount, the number of interviews and number of people you touched in the studies, and I said studies, was very impressive and rather prophetic. It wasn't, a lot of us authors will interview 50 people or 100 people and poof, we have a great book. This one goes the extra 50 miles. So I really appreciated that about your book. So remember, everyone, if you're watching this, we're going to be announcing in our show notes and in our follow-up discussions on LinkedIn and YouTube who the winners are. So we will make sure to hear from you because we're running out of time because we're having too much fun. But we hear you, David Lopez. Kristen is here saying this is a fantastic discussion. Andrea, thank you for your positive remarks as well from Miami. And yes, please reach out to me after the show. Send me a note to lisa@lisanorell.com, lisa@lisanorell.com, because I'm going to be sending out announcements about the book winners. Tiffani, I am so thrilled for your second book. Do not wait too long to give us your third book.
Oh, I don't know.
What would your mother be saying to you right now, watching the birth of this second book and your great success in your role at Salesforce? Because she really was an inspiration for this book.
Yeah, she passed away the day I turned in my final manuscript. So the dedication to the book is to her. She wouldn't have read it, that's for sure, but she would say, "Oh, it's fantastic. I read it. It's great." She's was my biggest cheerleader. So we'll just pretend that she read it and she thinks that it's great. But, she was just tickled that, I, in her words, that I was able to get a job where I could help people, sell computers and printers. That's what she thinks that I did, which I did really early in my career. But that, when any of her friends had a problem with their PC at home, she'd be like, "Call my daughter. She can fix it for you." Yeah, super cute. But yeah, I think she'd be proud. I think for sure, I know for sure, as a matter of fact, she never would have ever expected I wrote a book, let alone two. But I hope she'd be proud.
I believe she is. So, Tiffani, this is a great book. It's The Experience Mindset. You gave us some great wisdom today, regardless of what company size we are running. These are very important and very up-to-date pieces of advice to help you avoid old habits that no longer serve you as you bring together and marry together EX and CX. So thanks, Tiffani, for being with us today.
Thank you, Lisa, for having me. It was a pleasure to be here.
See you again. This is Lisa. We are running out of time today. I have really enjoyed this time with a fellow 100 Coaches colleague, Tiffani Bova. Make sure you send me a note to lisa@lisanorell.com if you want to claim your free book copy of The Experience Mindset. We are going to be back here again next month in September. We're doing an AMA session, Ask Me Anything. I've been getting a lot of questions lately from people either in career transition or stepping into a bigger role as a CEO or CMO. This is your chance to get some one-on-one time with me. So join us September 1st. And then in October 5th, we have another colleague, Mr. Eric Schurenberg joining us to talk about the importance of truth in marketing. He's the former CEO of Inc. and now serves on several boards and is a publishing icon. So until I see you again in September, enjoy your Friday and we'll catch you soon.